1994 hasn't resulted in the redistribution of wealth that was hoped. Today, the wealth gap between the average black person and the white rich is greater in real terms than it was in 1990 when the white supremacists ruled.
It's one of the deals that had to be cut. If you want to strip it of a lot of the verbiage, what it came down to was that, well, the whites would accept democracy provided that they weren't stripped of the property they'd acquired as a result of racial oppression. That's basically what the deal was.
If, when the African National Congress took over, they had said, okay, we want just not a political revolution, but an economic one. We're going to radically redistribute the wealth of this country, as we've been promising all these years, you know, to give the mines to those who work in them and the factories to those who work in them and so forth. I think they would not have been allowed to be part of the international economic system. And I think that probably the majority of the white population would have left the country if their wealth had been taken away from them, their land had been taken away from them, as happened in Zimbabwe, for example. And economically, that would have been disastrous.
In the United States, the overt structures of racism have been dismantled without many black Americans escaping poverty. A recent study found that in 1968, a typical black family had around 60% of the income of an average white family. Today, it has only 58%. Black unemployment is more than twice that of whites, a gap wider than in 1972. Black infants are almost 2.5 times more likely to die in their first year of life, worse than in 1970. The belief that we live in a post-racist society has blinded us to the impact that skin color plays in determining our destinies.
Identically qualified black and white resumes, where the black ones are identified by the fact that the candidate has a name that is recognizably associated with African-American identity, get different treatment when they arrive on the desks of employers. And this is not a hypothesis, this is an experiment that has been done, in some cases with large amounts of data. And that's just still true. It's still true that being black disadvantages you in the employment market, just as, by the way, being a woman does, doing the same experiments. And that's despite the fact, probably, that the officials who manage this system don't think of themselves as racist and don't recognize what they're doing as practicing some kind of racial discrimination.
What drives the colorblind racism of the 21st century are three central institutional processes: mass unemployment, mass incarceration, and mass disenfranchisement. Mass unemployment, that is, for young black and Hispanic males between the ages of about 18 years to 35 years. In 1980, there were about 500,000 prisoners in the United States. Today, there are 2.3 million. About half of them are black in the United States. And so this process of mass incarceration in many states leads to the third pillar of colorblind racism, which is mass disenfranchisement. So in the state of Florida, in the year 2000, where George Bush wins the presidency by fewer than 600 votes, in that state, 818,000 Florida citizens who live in that state, they pay taxes to the United States, could not vote for the rest of their lives.
Disenfranchisement is not the only feature of Jim Crow to have resurfaced. In the mid-1990s, The Bell Curve became a bestseller by claiming that black people's poor performance in IQ tests proved their innate intellectual inferiority to white people. This was used to justify cutting back black people's benefits. But later criticisms were given little media attention. Its research relied on funding from the Pioneer Fund, a trust endowed by a Nazi sympathizer. Its authors acknowledged help from a professor who writes, "What is called for here is not genocide of incompetent cultures, but the phasing out of such peoples."
It was suggesting you can throw all the money you want and you can try to give them all the education you want, it will be a waste. A pig is a pig is a pig is a pig, and you can't put a pig in a chicken coop, because pigs are pigs, and chickens are chickens, and eagles are eagles. And so what it was trying to suggest is that all the social programming and social engineering that you're putting forth to help black people is all for naught, because they're inherently inferior.
Today, science is eroding the biological basis for the idea of race. The Human Genome Project has found that the average genetic difference between one African and another is the same or greater than that between a black person and a white person. The only genes that distinguish races are those determining skin color, and yet for many people, those genes, just 5 out of around 25,000, continue to shape destinies and determine fates.
The mythology of race exists for no other reason than to justify the attempt of one group to dominate another. And the useful fiction of race continues to allow people to conspire against the best in our human communities. So you can say to a guy, for instance, who's trying to hail a cab in New York City, "Excuse me, cab, I know you think I'm a black man and that race exists. I'm a fiction. I'm a figment of your imagination. I'm a social construct. There's no biological base or empirical verification for my melanin differential. I'm simply another human being possessing a different magnitude of melanin. I still ain't picking you up because you're trying to go to Harlem, brother. That's race."
Despite the long struggle against racism, it continues to pollute our mental environment. Its enduring potency ensures that people are denied opportunities, justice, and human rights. Key institutions stay racially monolithic, and racial privilege endures. For 5 centuries, racism has legitimized assassination, massacres, and genocides. The doctrine of white supremacy has demonized, brutalized, and dehumanized the non-white peoples of the earth. Racism has been the global driving force behind the dispossession of continents, the destruction of civilizations, and the extermination of entire peoples. The legacy of enslavement and empire has created deadly divides between the West and the rest. In scientific terms, racial differences have no material significance. Yet racism continues to shape the destinies of individuals and nations all over our world.